Right, well, good morning everybody. My name is Michael Keane. I'm the Sector Director for the Central Agencies or Financial Services for this year. My key role is a whole of government audit, the financial statement audit for the whole of government, and also QTC, QIC, Treasury, DPC, so the centralised agencies. As part of my role, I'm responsible for the internal controls report to Parliament, which we produce on an annual basis, which for this year focused mainly on the budget departments, as well as looking at the internal control environment and reporting that. We also had a bit of a deeper dive into the CFO certification that those departments are required to undertake each year, as well as the internal audit functions, audit committees, and we also had a bit of a look at corporate cards as well, the controls over corporate cards across the budget agencies, and if there's any room for improvement in terms of that process, the administrative process for corporate cards. Each year when we do our financial audits, we're required under the auditing standards to make an assessment of the internal control environment and to report any weaknesses that we find when we do that, when we make that assessment. This year we're using an internal controls framework that's on the screen there, where we have 5 elements. We have the monitoring controls, which included the internal audit function, audit committee, and also CFO certification. That's where that fit with our elements and the way we approach our internal control review. We also have information communication controls, the control environment, which is your policies and procedures, risk management, which addresses management's risk appetite and the way that's documented and addressed, and also control activities. So with the control activities, when we did our reviews this year, when we did our interim testing, you'll find in the summary of that report, we talk about the results of that interim testing, how many issues that we actually raised as a result, how many control activity issues that we raised as a result of those reviews. And you'll see that whilst the overall number of issues that we have raised has decreased from 2012 to 2013, the number of control activities specifically has increased. So I would have thought, intuitively, I would have thought that with the environment that we're in, with past events that have happened, such as the health issue with the Tahitian Prince, front page news, that was a control activity breakdown. I would have thought that I would have seen a tightening of the control activities, but it's sort of a bit of counterintuitive. So more work will be done in 2014 to understand which areas are going wrong, why they're going wrong. Is a continuation of previous years? Why isn't there being movements taken to address these issues? So that was something that we noticed, and that's noted in the report. Control activities aren't necessarily result in financial embarrassment. They can also result in other types of embarrassment for different organisations, like, for example, the Test, if anybody watches Test cricket, pressing the wrong button on a stump mic resulted in an F-bomb being publicly available for everybody across national TV. So there are front page things that do happen from breakdowns in control activity. So this is why we are focusing a report solely on monitoring or internal controls, which includes control activities. It's a very important part of government business. So in terms of our deep dives with the CFO certification, the CFO certification is a legislative process for the budget departments. There is guidance that Treasury has published for how that process should work, or better practice for that process, how it works with guidance statements. What is missing potentially is the level of assurance that is being provided. So there are statements being made, and there is a certificate that's being signed. There are processes that back that up. But what we found was missing was the link between what the accountable officer is actually after, or what the accountable officer is expecting from that process in terms of comfort over the control environment, so that the financial statements can be signed off by the accountable officer. So you'll see that in the report once again. You'll see a commentary about a lack of documentation of meetings with the accountable officer and discussion on the process and what's being provided by the CFOs. We also We also mentioned that there wasn't really a one-stop shop document for most agencies in terms of their assessment of the financial risks for the agencies. There's a lot of operational type risk registers that sit within the agencies, but without that focus on the financial elements and what the risk of material misstatement is, if there was a breakdown in control activities for those line items. So, being the pedantic financial statement people that we are, we've made that as a recommendation. Obviously, there's no legislative requirement for the agencies to have a separate register, but we consider it to be a better practice that information is at least captured somewhere within an agency as to how you go about addressing those risks, who the responsible officer is, and strategies for mitigation where there are issues found. So that maturity process also occurring. With the internal audit functions, we reviewed the internal audit functions across the budget agencies to gain an understanding of what type of work is undertaken by those functions, how they are run, how they are resourced, and their competencies, how they are reviewed, peer reviewed. So there was a number of reviews or a number of aspects of that review that we did to try to make an understanding of the effectiveness of the internal audit function. We also looked at the outstanding audit recommendations across those or that are raised by the internal audit units to see the timing of resolution of those issues and try to make an assessment from that as to the effectiveness once again of the audit function, internal audit function. What you'll see on the screen there is our unique ability to go across the agencies and make a review of the resourcing in terms of the dollar budget for internal audit functions, compare that within the agency against their controlled expenditure. That was one measure, and also compare that across their peers, so do a peer review, and we've come up with a graph there. Obviously, the work that an internal audit undertakes to mitigate the internal control risks within any agency, it depends on a number of factors. It depends on agency operations, it depends on risk appetite. So there are a number of varying factors. So our review, we say once again, we say that in the report that our review it's not the be all and end all, it's an indicator. The best way of coming up with a hard and fast or possibly a more hard and fast measure of the resourcing and the adequacy of resourcing for an internal audit would be to get, say, possibly again, a benchmark done for your individual agency against others. When we talk about audit issues, we talk about rating audit issues, low, moderate and high risk. With those risks, we have timeframes, we've set timeframes that we would expect to see the resolution of those issues. So for a high risk issue, you'd probably expect to see resolution within 3 months. For a moderate risk issue, rule of thumb, possibly 6 months. Lower risk issues could take a bit longer depending on the nature of the issue. With our review, we found that there were a number of departments that had long outstanding high risk audit issues, moderate to high risk audit issues, which once again is a little bit counterintuitive. If the author of the issue is saying, hang on a second, we've got this pretty important issue that we've found here with your control environment, we've rated it high risk, which is a high risk to the department, and then we see that then as we come along as auditors and we see, oh, hang on a second, we've done this review and you've got these high risk audit issues that's still outstanding after 12 months, something is obviously not right there. There's obviously either management issues with the issue itself, possibly resourcing issues. We're often told that there's resourcing issues within certain sections of certain departments, so issues aren't addressed, but the fact remains that the issue is still outstanding and it's still long outstanding, so the risk is there while it's outstanding. As part of our review, we also looked at the Audit Committee and the Audit Committee functions. We found that the Audit Committees obviously have appropriate charters in place. They have regular meetings. Legislatively, they tick the boxes. In terms of how they operate and the membership, we had a look at across the board how many independent members there are on each of the audit committees. We looked at the size of the audit committees. We also looked at, once again, connected to internal audit functions, we looked at the resolution of audit issues. The Under-Treasurer put out guidance recently in terms of audit committees and the membership, and she, the immediate past Under-Treasurer, sorry, she mentioned that she would expect to see in a longer term for audit committees across the budget agencies to have at least a 50% external independent membership of the audit committees. So the graph we're showing there shows you how many independents and how many internal members are on the audit committees presently for the budget agencies. She also mentioned that she would expect to see a functional size of the membership to be within 3 to 6 members, and a number of the agencies currently have more than 6. What we're trying to aim for there is that the audit committee shouldn't be a management committee, because you're probably losing, the accountable officer is probably losing a little bit of traction there for that independent advice on his control environment, or his or her, sorry, control environment. So we see that as an improvement opportunity for the audit committees as well. With corporate cards, we did the corporate card review, being in a position to gather data from QSS and also directly from the banks on corporate cards, and also view the overall reporting in terms of risky transactions for the corporate cards across the budget agencies. And we also could see the acquittal process, return and issue of corporate cards. So we had a centralised review performed of the corporate cards within the agencies, and we've shown here a percentage of corporate card expenditure against supplies and services across the agencies as a bit of an indicator of who's spending what and how they're spending it. The big thing that we came up with as a result for the corporate cards is that we found that the control environment was quite strong, and that the monitoring of transactions and the reporting of transactions is robust across the agencies. With this in mind, we did an analysis of the number of transactions that are occurring within the agencies via shared services. We found out how many of those transactions are being processed via corporate card, and then we looked at the $5,000 transactions and below, and made an assumption that all of those transactions could be processed by using a corporate card. Given the information available via the Queensland Shared Services in terms of the cost of transactions, the processing of transactions, we struck a dollar value of over $10 million worth of savings in the current financial year if corporate cards were used for all transactions below $5,000. Now, I've had conversations with a number of the CFOs within the agencies, and this is blue sky, obviously. There are certain circumstances and obviously where corporate cards can't be used for those transactions, but this is an indicator of the amount of transactions and the potential savings. So obviously that would be ideal if it actually happened that way. So the report is on our website, it's available on our website. I did send a link to all the CFOs within the agencies, so they had that as soon as it was published. And it is a living document, obviously, in terms of how it feeds into next year's internal controls report from our activities, or our audit activities. Next year we'll be looking at financial or risk management within the agencies, so that's a topic that's coming up. I'll be controlling it centrally, and we'll be aiming to have that in everybody's client strategies, financial statement client strategies for this year. We're also looking at financial delegations, the controls over financial delegations within the agencies. We'll be doing a follow-up on all the issues that we've raised within this report, and We're also going to do a bit of a fraud assessment follow-up from a fraud report that we released earlier in the year as well.